our community brought to life in the Shaw Community Hub. I've been really fortunate in the series so far, and this is only my fourth one, that people have really enjoyed them. People have really welcomed the opportunity to come to the library. But Janet and I both feel especially honored tonight to welcome Hubert Medhurst. And I said he's come to the library and been part of my library career right from the get-go. Coming to the library, and we feel very honored that we can have this little celebration tonight in honor of Hubert Medhurst. So we're going to have Mr. Medhurst is going to talk a little bit about his life growing up in Fort Frances and McCurvin, and we're going to have refreshments and lots of well wishes. So everybody enjoy.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about things that I saw and remember as far back as 1914. That's 99 years, quite a while. Begin with start at the west end of town, which was in McCurvin, and lead you into town. To begin with, you may not know it, but there's a huge hole in the earth in the west end of town. It's man-made. But it wasn't so big when I was little. It was called the gravel pit. And what's interesting is that the CNR had a railroad track going into the pit, and they had a steam shovel loading the cars, and I imagine it was ballast for the railroad track. I lived on a road that went around the gravel pit, and I saw a team of oxen bringing wagon into town. Team of oxen. I saw that. In those early days, Fort Frances sent their garbage to McCurvin. And on a short road off the main one, there was a big burner. And there was a ramp going up the burner, leveled off for us, and a ramp coming on the other side, and the garbage was hauled by a horse and wagon. And there was two doors open up on the top. And they burned everything. Well, no, not everything. They didn't burn any glass that I know of. Bottles especially, because a prominent citizen from Emo came and got us kids to pick up all the wine and whiskey bottles we get lined. I think he was bootlegging. Anyway, on the river road, which we call the river road. The roads now, I think, have numbers, but we had no roads then. Anyway, a little bit west of the cemetery now, there was a brickyard. Not many people know that. I never saw it operating, but us kids played with it, climbing all over it. And that was one thing that I don't believe you know. There was no houses in the area. Only the one on the north side, which was one where I was born, and the midwife was in the next one. And coming a little further towards the town, there was a schoolhouse, a red brick two-story one, where I went to school. The reason I'm mentioning that is because in my day there were no snow plows, no buses, you walked. And you did not go to school until you were 6 years old, and then you started in grade 1. There was no nursery school or kindergarten or anything like that. And our curriculum, I guess, was quite simple in those days. We had arithmetic and spelling, geography and composition and those things. But our arithmetic especially was simple. It was just adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division, fraction. When they gave you a problem, they gave you a scripper and a pencil to figure it out. We had no things to punch with your fingers. Another thing about the school was the teacher taught all 8 grades in one room. And we had no bullying, no drugs, no liquor, no cigarettes. The teacher was in control all the time. She was there in the classroom while you were there, and when you were in recess, she was there too. She was in control. And in my day, you did not question the authority of the teacher. She was the leader. Then we come a little closer to town, and there's a road going north where you go by the Canadian Tire and whatnot. There was no houses on the north side of the road. But before you got to the railroad track, there was a slaughterhouse there. That was probably where they killed the animals for the butcher shops in town. That was on the west side of the road. On the east side of the road, there was another small building there they called the Dynamite House. I guess that's where they kept the dynamite and fuses and that. Because in those days, early days, the farmers, I believe, used dynamite to get the stumps out of the ground. That's what I believe. Now, coming into Fort Francis, the edge of Fort Francis was Wright Avenue in those days, and that's the first time you saw any houses. There was no houses before that. And then you go a little farther along where the road intersects 3rd Street east, and there was a red brick building there which was Mackenzie Hospital, and you see it's still there. Incidentally, Douglas, that's where your mother had her appendix removed. Did you, many of you people remember the trains, they used to come in and passenger trains?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you all know about where you went to bed, what do you call that, the sleeper car? Do you remember about the sleeper car?
Yeah, the roundhouse.
There was a sleeper car set aside, and like the trains going east were in the daytime, but the ones going west came in about midnight at night. And on the sleeper car, if you were going bought a paid for a berth, you could go to bed at 10 o'clock in the morning, in the evening, and wake up in Winnipeg next morning. That's what you did. When going a little farther east, where 3rd Street intersects Central Avenue, there was a big building there between 2nd and 3rd Street. It was the Western Groceries. It burned down but was never replaced. I don't remember anything on 2nd Street, but when you come to 1st Street, if you stood on the corner of 1st Street and Central Avenue, you could see the river. And I watched the boats come up the river in those days. Now that was 1914, I'm sure, because I read somewhere that after 1914 they discontinued the boat traffic. Now going down east on 1st Street, there was a wholesale house there, and then where the Times office is now, that was a garage belonged to Lester Marsh. One time I remember they brought in a Stanley steamer. Have you ever heard of such a car? And they never went anywhere. I know that's the only one that I ever sort of heard about. Then right next to that going east was the bottling works, Coca-Cola. That was Stanley Marsh. There was nothing on the south side of the road that I recall. But coming up to Scott Street, and the corner of Scott, of course, was the hotel. And there was nothing much till you got almost to Moore Avenue. There was a Chinese restaurant there, I believe, on the west side of the street. And when you crossed Moore Avenue, of course, all the buildings, businesses were on the north side of the road. I assume that was to get the sun, benefit of the sun in the wintertime. I don't know, I guess. But there was a bank on the corner, and there was another clothing store, confectionery. Now, he made the best banana splits I ever saw. He had a whole banana split, 2 scoops of ice cream, and a whole thing smothered with pineapple. Boy, that was a treat. And then we come to the Wells Hardware. The one thing about the Wells Hardware that I remember was they had no cash registers on the floor where they sold things. What they had was a wire going up to the 2nd floor, and there was a little container attached to that somehow, about the size of a bean can of beans. when you made your purchase, they unscrewed that and put your money in there, and then they pulled the lever and the thing shot up to the front. And she made the change and gave you the seat. And then we come to, I think, Fraley's drugstore. When I was in there one time, it's the first time I ever saw anybody with a hearing aid. And I could tell you a little story about that, because I remember him complaining to somebody about when he took it off at night and went to bed, it was frustrating, he couldn't hear anything. But you know, my wife and I both wore hearing aids for years. And when we take them off, we couldn't hear anything. When we took it out and went to bed, you know, I didn't find that any handicap. Anyway, it was a shoe repair shop, I think, that's the show. When it comes to the show, quite interesting there as far as we kids were concerned, because on Saturdays they ran a matinee. And there was always this one where the hero was laid at, well, there was two of those instances I remember. It was a thing that they changed every week, like a new episode, like that they have on TV now. And I remember a couple of them. One where the hero was laying across the track all tied down, and the train was coming, and smoke was pouring out of the chimney. And the hero was over there someplace on horseback riding at a dead gallop. And then they said, then the show ended. Come next week and find out. Then there was another one where she was tied off on the bed of a sawmill, and this big circle of saw was coming towards it. And again, the hero was there on the horseback. And of course, they ended it before it had to come next week. You know, there was no kissing in those days. There were no bedroom scenes. The hero might kiss his horse, but you know. Going past the picture show was Brecken's Bakery. And then there was some other stores that I can't recall just what they were. And then there was butcher shop, McCoy's butcher shop, and then on the corner of Portage and Scott on the north side was Baker's drugstore. That was the end of the business section as far as Scott Street was concerned. But you move around to Church Street, and the business churches there were on the south side of the street. There was a hotel in the corner of Central on Church Street. And the first building on Church Street on there was a tailor shop, I believe. Then there was a private house. Then there was a series of buildings sort of all tied together. One of them was the post office. That's where the post office was. Then on the corner of the church and Mowat was a dragon store. Across the road was Christie's butcher shop. And going south from the butcher shop was Johnson's Hardware. I remember looking at a bunch of pocket knives through the glass and hoping, God, I'd like to have one of them when I was a little kid. And you know, sometime later, I guess, my birthday came along and my aunt said she had a present for me, one that I wanted. And of course, I picked up a fuss, and my birthday was tomorrow, like, and I cried, and I guess I acted like a brat. She finally gave me the knife. Well, we should have stabbed me. Anyways, going north on Mowat Avenue, on the west side, there wasn't much, well, I should come from Scott Street south, because I remember better that way. On the west side of Mowat there was a liquor store, then there was a clothing store, then Glade Hills had a drugstore, had a jeweler shop, and then there was a barber shop. In those days there were barber shops. There was no ladies' tonsil or parlor or whatever they call it. No, I never remembered anything for the ladies. Anyway, one thing about barber shop, they had a room in the back where they had a bath. That was for the benefit of those people who spent the winter in the bush. They must have been pretty ripe by the time they come out. I don't think they had any baths in the bush. And you got a shave and a haircut and a bath. And they shaved you with a straight razor. There was no electric razor or anything like that. And to cut your hair, they had clippers that they cut. And if they pushed faster than they clipped, they pulled the hair. I know that. And of course, the next thing to that was, as far as I remember, was the hotel. And on the east side of Maud, where there was the Bank of Commerce, then there was a school, and Dr. Moore had a building and he had his office downstairs. And next to that was a small building that Warner had an office where they sold real estate, I believe. And that's going north on Maud from Scott. On the west side there was a series of buildings that sort of tied together, and one of them was the police offices. I know, because my dad was a policeman, I used to go there sometimes. That's as far as I remember there. But on the east side of Maud, going north, there was the bank there, and then there was Dr. Reeves had his house there, and he had his dentist office downstairs. And I can't remember any others on there, but the back end of where Green Store is right now, I believe there was a blacksmith shop. I remember watching them when the sparks flying and the bellows going. I watched them. And then I went down to the farther in Portage Avenue, where the town hall was then, and the fire hall was there. I remember the horses being facing to the street, and the harness was suspended above them, ready to let down, so they could fasten it quick and go to the fire. That's the thing I probably forgot other things, but that's about as far as the business section I can recall. I didn't see anything past Portage Avenue. That was all the business that I can remember now. And that's, the Scott Street was a dirt road. I remember horses going down there every rain and having a struggle hauling a wagon. There was nothing on the south side of the street at that time. There was one building there which they called the high school. It was the high school, but that wasn't all there was to that, because there was two types of school in there, the general and then the commercial. And the commercial did not go to that school. I was taking commercial and we went over to hardware. That was hardware where we went to school. And, you know, I thought, it's strange, we never saw a typewriter, but they must have had them in those days. You know, what were we learning? I forgot. As a matter of fact, I didn't finish only one term there, and then I went to work. I worked, let's see, for my dad. He was a foreman on digging sewer line going down Scott Street. And the first year I was a water boy. Went along and everybody drank out of the same dipper. It wasn't very sandy, I guess, but I didn't hear anybody getting sick. The next year I got promoted to a shovel operator, you know, the type they did and so that. And then after that I went to work driving a truck. We were hauling sand across the river to build the Insulite plant, that's now long gone. Then, in 1927, I started in the paper mill at 35 cents an hour part-time. And one thing I've gotten from that I think a lot of is a border pass on the bridge where I don't pay. There's a free pass on the bridge. They gave me back in 1970. And that's how I saw things back when I was a kid. I thank you for listening. Probably a lot of things I forgot. That's what I read.
There's a couple of celebratory certificates for you today, and one of them is from Sarah Campbell,
Oh, yeah.
and the other one is from John Rafferty. I think you must just about be able to make wallpaper with all your certificates that you have. Hey? Yeah. Well, we were going to light our candles and have a proper happy birthday. And we thought maybe we'd bring in a fireman, but I think he got called away.
You've done it enough. We should go to